Welcome back to the Brewer Fanatic podcast. I'm your host, Jack Stern, joined by my co-host, Spencer Michaelis. We are coming to you every week from Brewer Fanatic HQ, also known as our respective basements. Or Spencer, are you recording from your basement or your living room?
I'm in a living room.
Okay, I'm in a basement and you're in a living room. I guess that doesn't matter a whole lot, but if anyone was looking for a quick glimpse into the behind the scenes of how this operation is put together, there are some fun details for you. But we're coming to you every week with the latest Brewers news and analysis from the week during which we're recording. It should be Friday, May 17th when this is going up, and the Brewers have just wrapped up a 5-2 homestand against the Cardinals and the Pirates, a pair of division rivals. The Brewers taking care of business at home before they head back on the road for an extended road trip. We'll talk about that when we get to the end of this show. But all told, a really fun week for the Brewers. A lot of good stuff going on this week. Wouldn't you say so, Spencer?
Yeah, the offense really woke up this week. It felt like it's been we've talked about it all 6 episodes we've done before this, but it's been solid and it had a really good start, obviously, and it kind of felt more like that opening 4 series stretch where the offense just kind of mashed for the whole 2 weeks. And this is kind of how this week went as well. Just a lot of relatively high scoring games. I don't know, did we score less than four? We scored three one time, but it was pretty much four or higher almost every game of this stretch. So it was fun to watch the bats get going, especially some of the young guys, and especially at the end of the Pirates series, I would say.
That mashing already started in the first game of this homestand. The Brewers, in their 3-1 series win over the Cardinals, 3-1. In game one, pretty convincing win. Well, in both of the first two games, to be honest with you, very convincing wins. Game one was 7-1. The Brewers getting the matchup against Sonny Gray, who they have not had a whole lot of success against, especially recently, but they did a really nice job against him in game one, really jumping on the fastballs from Gray. We've seen him dismantle the Brewers with his breaking balls in the past. Those are really going to be his bread and butter, getting into counts where he can throw those breaking balls. He's got the sweeping slider, he's got the curveball, both really, really good pitches that are tough to do anything with. The Brewers didn't really let him get to a position where he could use either one of those breaking balls. They did a lot of damage early in counts on fastballs. They scored 6 runs against Sonny Gray on 3 home runs, and 6 of their 7 hits against him came on some variation of a fastball. So Gray has a four-seamer, a cutter, and a sinker. The four seamer is kind of like a mini cutter in its own way based on the movement profile, but they're all different kinds of fastballs, and the Brewers are basically jumping on anything hard out of his hand that had that fastball spin access. So they did a really nice job. Rhys Hoskins getting it going with a 2-run home run in the first inning. Jake Bauers adding a solo shot in the second, and then Joey Ortiz hitting a home run in the fourth, and then Christian Yelich adding some more runs to the tally with an RBI triple in the fifth inning. Again, just doing a lot of that damage against fastballs. And I asked Rhys Hoskins about this after the game. Like, was this something that you guys kind of had in mind? He didn't say they really went into the game trying to ambush the fastball, but he did say that it did help them that they were able to do damage early in counts on hard stuff before Sonny Gray even really had a chance to settle in and get himself into counts where he could use those breaking balls. So the Brewers offense doing a really, really nice job there to back Tobias Myers on the mound, who we saw some steps forward in this start. I think it has been a slow upward trend for him in each of his big league outings. But really, the struggle for him in this one was efficiency. He only gave up 1 earned run in 4 innings. I believe it was on a home run again as well. The long ball was a struggle for him in Double A last year. It's been the case so far in the big leagues, and I don't think that's ever going to be a strong suit for him based on his pitch shapes and his pitch mix. When he gets hurt, it is going to be loud contact in the air, so he is probably going to be a guy who always gives up more home runs than you would like. But we started to see the swing and miss show up in this outing. He had 6 strikeouts in those 4 innings, only gave up 3 hits. Really, the problem was that he walked 4 guys, just getting into a lot of deep counts as well. When you pair the 4 walks and the 6 Ks, that means that's a lot of counts
Yeah.
where you're having to throw quite a few pitches to get past guys. But the stuff played the way that we were hoping to. I think you do also need to keep in mind that this was a struggling Cardinals offense, but still good stuff for him. He did end up being optioned to AAA after this outing. Right now, he's working in Nashville, kind of in some hybrid stints. I believe his last outing, he only went 2 innings down there, but just some stuff for him to work on. Pat Murphy said that, they kind of gave him some takeaways that he can take back to Nashville with him and work with the guys down there. But still a big part of this pitching staff. We'll see him again, probably making more starts or maybe relief outings for this team. He'll be back in some capacity. But was there anything that stood out to you, Spencer, just from the offensive approach this game or from what we saw from Tobias Myers?
Yeah, honestly, the Yelich RBI triple to me was one of my favorite at bats from any hitter on the Brewers this entire season so far. He got himself into a 2-0 count. He got a four seam fastball from Gray. He took a huge hack at it, fouled it straight back. It was probably a borderline strike at the top of the zone. Maybe not one you would necessarily want him to go after, but I love the swing. I love that he was one off the back injury. Just seeing him open it up like that is always good to see. Means he's feeling comfortable. Um, then he ends up working it to 3-1. He takes a ball on the next, or no, it's 2-2 after the next pitch. And then he takes a perfect changeup from Sonny Gray, a pitch that started right at the knees, dropped off late. Gray throws that changeup in the upper 80s, so it's not that big a difference between the fastball velocity, but it looked like a pitch that would have been very, very hard to lay off of for any hitter. And Yelich didn't even budge. He pretty much took it like he knew it was coming. And then on 3-2, Gray kind of gets in on his hands with a pretty much perfectly placed cutter right up and in, top of the zone, inside corner. And Yelich just is able to pull his hands in and hit a ball pretty hard down the right field line for that triple. And it was just kind of everything you would want to see from Yelich, where he's taking close pitches that are tough takes. He's opening it up on pitches that are hittable. And then he gets into a count where he does have two strikes. He's got a 3-2 count, and he's just able to hit the ball on a line hard on a perfect pitch, on another pitch that Sonny Gray would feel. I would guarantee you he left that at bat feeling pretty good about how he executed the changeup and the cutter, and Yelich still beat him. And that was just one of my favorite at bats of the entire season from anybody so far. I thought Myers' start was really good to see. It was nice to see him. We talked about it on the last episode. The velo has been coming out kind of flat early in games a lot. He was sitting in like that 93, 94 range in the first inning. He hit 95. So he got off to a better start because he had his better stuff right out of the gate. So that was good to see. And then we didn't talk about, or you didn't talk about it at all, but Jared Koenig coming in with the bases loaded, nobody out, really saved Tobias Myers' line because it was 2-3-4 for the Cardinals. And it's not the same 2-3-4 we've seen over the years for the Cardinals, but it was still the middle of their order. And Koenig came in and went, what was it? Pop up first. And then was it, I don't even
No, it
remember
started with Joey Ortiz made a nice
Oh,
play
yes.
crashing in on that
Yep.
grounder, which we should really talk about that too. I didn't even put this in the planning, but we just remembered it now.
Yeah,
That was a really, really nice play by
it
Joey
was.
Ortiz. It was a soft roller, and he won to. We always talk about how good he is at charging in and transferring really quick because he's just so ridiculously fast with the hands. But in this instance, he comes in on this ball. His momentum is taking him toward first base
Mm-hmm.
and he sees that he's got to play at the plate, changes course as his momentum's taking him to first. He's able to still square up with the plate and then throw a seed to home, and they get the lead out there. And that just completely changes the whole complexion of that inning for Jared Koenig as well, because you got that lead runner, and now you got one out, and now you're in a spot where, yeah, I can really get out of this without anybody scoring. You're a double play away at that point from getting out of this inning without anybody scoring.
Yeah.
But again, really nice work from Koenig as well, getting some help from the defense behind him. But that was a really, really good play by Joey Ortiz, and he probably deserves about as much credit as anyone for the Brewers getting out of that jam there.
Yeah, I completely forgot that was how it started. I remembered the Arenado pop up in foul territory. I remembered Burleson on TV for a split second. I didn't have the volume loud enough to hear the contact, and the way he had, the way he swung, I thought it may be a grand slam at the very first sign of contact. Obviously, he flew out short of even the warning track in right center to end the inning. But yeah, Koenig coming in and getting the job done. But you're definitely right. It doesn't get done without, or at least to that extent, it doesn't get done without Ortiz's play. And that game was still well within reach at that point, like a double in the gap. And that's, I believe it would have been 4-4 at that point if that would have happened. So, or maybe 5-4 or something, but it would have been a one-run game. And Koenig getting out of that was really big, but Ortiz's play definitely was the biggest part of that because that was way harder than he made it look. Now that I actually remember the play, like he made that look like it was routine, and that is not a routine play by any means. So, yeah, I mean those two for sure. At that point, the Brewers went on and scored on the Yelich triple right after that, I believe, and then that was pretty much the game. And then it was never really within reach again for the Cardinals. But in that moment when Caney came into the game, it was still very much a ball game.
Yeah, that the whole sequence there in that inning, very much like you said, saved the line for Tobias Myers. But something else I do want to circle back to, you kind of talked about this. The velocity was a lot better for him right from the get go in this one. We didn't really see any of the starting at 90, 91, and then he kind of ramps it up as he keeps going. And we did talk to him about that in the clubhouse after the game, and he basically said that he worked with Chris Hook on some stuff in between starts. He said Hook kind of worked with him on some mechanical things. They really worked on getting into the back hip more. So he's driving off the mound with more authority because that's really where your velocity is going to come from. It all starts with your lower body. And I'm sure, any pitching coach will tell you this, but it all starts with your legs. And that's where you're going to get a lot of your power from. So really, they just worked on more consistently getting into that back leg, driving down the mound with a little bit more authority so that that velocity is there consistently from the very start. And it was today, or in that game, I should say. But again, just another example of how good of a job Chris Hook does at working with these guys. I think he gets, credit for being good at the analytical side of things. I think that that's something people recognize, but also he's good mechanically with these guys too. Like he's hardly worked with Tobias Myers, and the ability to already be able to pick up on something like that and have a fix for him that they were able to enact between starts that quickly and get to the point where, just some between start work like that was able to make a big difference for him. Just really valuable stuff that he brings to this pitching staff. And I guess we can transition to game two now. The offensive, what's the word I'm looking for?
Onslaught.
Give me a positive word. Onslaught. There we go. I kind of had a little bit of a brain fart there. But the offensive onslaught continuing into game two, the Brewers defeating the Cardinals 11-2. We're not going to talk about that first, though, because the real story of this game was Robert Gasser finally getting to make his MLB debut. We probably would have seen him sooner in the year before the bone spurs cropped up at the end of spring training, but he was able to just kind of rest and rehab back from that. Ended up not missing a whole lot of time. Pat Murphy said that the Brewers, and Gasser also said as well, that he and the Brewers aren't really concerned about this long term. Kind of the way that they approach that kind of injury and the way that they look at bone spurs has changed a little bit now. It used to be it was something you almost always wanted to go in and get surgically removed, but they've kind of realized that at least as long as it's within like a certain point of how bad it's gotten in there, your body just kind of adapts to it, and the tissue adapts to it to the point where it doesn't really become a lasting issue that needs to be addressed. It doesn't really cause any more damage in that elbow. And that's what fortunately happened for Gasser, and that's how everything played out for him. So we were able to see him make his MLB debut in this second game here, and he did a really, really strong job. 6 scoreless innings for him, 2 hits allowed, and 4 strikeouts. He was extremely efficient in this game. I believe the pitch count was still under 80 pitches
Yep.
after those 6 innings, but at that point, the Brewers just not wanting to get too aggressive with him, just because he is still in a little bit of a stage of building up. But also, as I was kind of going through this game, I was still a little bit surprised to see him go out for the 6th, because I think what you need to worry about in this situation a little bit more than pitch count is how many up downs
Yep.
he's getting in a game. And did not have that many up downs at all this year yet at any point. So you were kind of wondering, the pitch count is in a really good spot, but are they going to send him out for that one more inning? And they did, and he answered the call really well. So a really nice job from Robert Gasser. The pitch mix was a little bit interesting. One thing that didn't surprise me was you could see he was working into righties with the fastballs, and that was, kind of something that he's going to need to be able to do to get outs. He was really, really sweeper heavy to lefties through, I think it was almost 60% sweepers to lefties. So when he was facing a left-handed batter, really leaning into that pitch, and he got some really, really ugly looking swings on it, especially from Lars Nootbaar,
Yeah.
a couple of at-bats in this game. And I think that does need to be the approach for him. Just go all out with that pitch when you're facing a lefty, because first of all, the movement is ridiculous on that pitch, but also with that low arm slot, he's got Gasser's basically side arming the ball
Mm-hmm.
because of how low his release slot is. That's also what helps that four-seamer play up in the zone, despite not having great vertical break on it, the angle that it's coming from. But when you're facing a lefty and he's throwing that sweeper, it looks like it's coming behind you. And then that thing sweeps all the way across the zone, even into the right-handed batter's box. That's just extremely tough to pick up and tough to follow. So just he did a really nice job executing there in those two areas. But the thing that stood out to me, maybe not so much on the positive side, was we didn't see any cutters from him. And that's a very big part of especially just being able to get guys out from both sides of the plate. He can kind of bore that cutter into righties. He didn't throw it once in his debut. We'll get to his second start a little later when he did start using it. But basically, he told Kurt Hogg from the Journal Sentinel that William Contreras just wasn't calling cutters and he wasn't, in a position in that game to really start shaking off because things were going so well. So I don't blame him either. But I was kind of wondering as that game was going on, like, is this a Contreras thing where he's just not calling any cutters right now? And it seemed like that was the case, but everything worked out from him. He did a really nice job. Spencer, did you have any takeaways from his debut?
No, this was one I attended in person, one of the few games I've been able to get to so far this year, but I
Hey, I
figured
was there too.
yeah, I know you were. I figured I better make it out for Gasser's debut because he is somebody that I've been a fan of for a while, and he's also one of the guys that felt like he could have a pretty good start to his major league career just with the way he pitches, the type of stuff he has, the type of command he has, and the fact that he throws a bunch of pitches. But like Jack just talked about, I think the biggest surprise for me was the complete lack of any cutters in the debut, and the fact that the sinker got pretty decent results against it because I'm not a huge fan of that pitch. I don't know that it's a great pitch. I would use it lefty lefty, like in lefty lefty matchups for him, but it worked fine against the Cardinals. And I do think, while I very much enjoyed the debut, and I do like Gasser's potential and the idea of what he could be in the future, we do have to point out, I think, that the Cardinals are the third worst team in baseball against left-handed pitching this year, with a 70 weighted runs created plus as a team. So it was kind of a perfect matchup for him in his debut. But on the same hand, like, we've seen plenty of people go out there and struggle to throw strikes, struggle to even spot up at all in their debuts. And it doesn't matter who's hitting because they don't have to swing or they don't have to do much damage. And Gasser only ended up having one free pass. It was a hit by pitch. I think it might have been a 2-strike hit by pitch too, where he was trying to go up and in with the fastball. But either way, that was the only free pass he had in 6 innings, and he only gave up 2 hits. So 3 base runners in 6 innings against any team of any caliber in MLB, you got the job done. And it was a really impressive debut. And I do want to warn people just to not get too far over their skis with him. Like, we'll talk about the second start, which also ended up having good results, but this is a guy, there's going to be bumps in the road. He's a young pitcher, so just be ready for that. The four seam plays well at the top, but it is also a pitch that could get hit around for some power at times, kind of in the Tobias Myers type of situation. So don't be surprised if at some point he does have a game where he gives up a couple homers and he doesn't look great. And it's going to be part of the journey for him, but you can see what he's got and what he can bring to the table. And what that is a 5-pitch mix that he can at least keep hitters off balance with most of them. And then that sweeper is going to be devastating to lefties. And he did a good job of landing it for strikes, especially like backdooring it against the Cardinals in that first start too. So I think it's a pitch he can use against righties. I don't know if it's going to be something he wants to use a ton against them, but I don't think it's one where it's, he can't still throw it 25, 30% at times when he's got it going. He can back foot it or backdoor it against them. And the movement it generates is hard for any righty or lefty hitter to kind of pick up and square up at the very least. So yeah, a lot of good stuff from him in his debut.
Speaking of good stuff, we should probably talk about those 11 runs that the Brewers
Yeah.
scored in this game. There were some more onslaughts, to use Spencer's word. Spencer's word of the day. It's like we're Sesame Street now. Spencer, you can have your minor league sandbox and your word of the day. Or would it
Yes.
be word of the week?
It's word of the week, and that
Word of the
sounds
week. I
better
like
too.
that better. It's got more
Yeah.
alliteration. Word of the week. But anyway, the Brewers having a couple of big innings in this game. They put up 5 in the 5th inning, really breaking out in that frame. Bryce Terang starting things off with the RBI double. Christian Yelich commanding some attention in the headlines with his beautiful bunt single that bounced off the third base bag, just rolled that thing right down the line. That scored a run. And then Willy Adames doing some damage with a double in that inning. The Brewers would add 4 more in the 7th inning. Sal Frelick doing a nice job in his at bat. We haven't seen a whole lot from him offensively or really in the field, but he turned things on this week. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get further into this episode. But he hit a hard ground ball that deflected off the glove of Jose Fermin at second base and got through for a RBI. And then Jake Bauers hit a triple in the inning as well. And finally, some love for Kevin Herget, who a lot of people may not even remember is on the team. But Kevin Herget doing a nice job getting a 3-inning save there. not the most glamorous role, but it very much helps the outlook of your bullpen when you can have those guys at least eating some innings for you on the back end in some low leverage spots. And he very much did that. So congratulations to Kevin Herget on your second career save. It was not his first career save. He also had a 3 inning save. I think it was with the Reds.
I believe that's the
His
only other MLB team he has
Yes,
pitched
his
for.
his last MLB season, he picked up a 3 inning save. So it's not the first time he's done this, but still providing a little bit of value for the Brewers that way. Game 3, Milwaukee once again getting another W, securing the series victory, 5-3 in that one. Getting on the board first were the Brewers with a bases loaded hit by pitch to Jake Bauers, which, believe it or not, was only the first bases loaded hit by pitch on which the Brewers would score in this game. We'll get to that second one in a couple seconds here. But Freddie Peralta would relinquish that early lead in the 5th inning. He did not make a play on a fairly routine bunt back to the mound, and that just kind of trickled down into a little bit of a rough inning for him. He would then allow a 2-run single to give the Cardinals the lead. But then the Brewers starting their comeback with another bases loaded hit by pitch, this one to Gary Sanchez in the 6th inning. That brought it to a 1-run game. And then Rhys Hoskins stepping up in the 7th, hitting a go-ahead 3-run home run to give the Brewers a lead that they would not give up. Brian Hudson and Trevor McGill coming out of the pen, doing a really nice job on the back end to nail that one down. I do want to come back to Freddie Peralta here. So he went 6 innings in this game, struck out 8 guys. Again, more of what we've come to expect from Peralta, getting a lot of swing and miss. But he did allow the 3 runs again, had a rough go of it when he got into that 5th inning. And he started the season exceptionally well. Like, he was looking elite through his first few starts. Things have kind of come back down. I'm not going to say come back down to earth. I guess you'll kind of realize why as I get into this. But he's now sitting at a 3.63 ERA, a 3.09 FIP, so fielding independent pitching. For those who might not know, that's kind of like ERA, but it's an estimator based off of walks, strikeouts, home runs, hit by pitches, basically all the plays that don't involve defenders. It's kind of meant to assign well, here's how well you did based on the things you can control as a pitcher. Not perfect, but still sometimes a useful estimator to have. His skill interactive ERA, which is kind of like a beefed up FIP that considers a couple more factors on balls in play, that's 301. And then his deserved run average from Baseball Prospectus is 3.83. Basically, all of these numbers are good. They're quite good. They're pretty good, but not on the Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff type level, which is now the role that Peralta is being asked to fill, since those guys are both either with a different team or out for the season with an injury in the case of Woodruff. And I kind of want to raise this question because, again, Freddie is having a nice year. This is not, meant to be, let's unreasonably knock on Freddie Peralta, but it's also not growth from where Freddie Peralta's been for a few years now. And I feel like we're all just kind of sitting here waiting for Freddie to take this next step. And it looked like it was happening the first few weeks of the season. But now we're a little more than a month in. We're on, what are we, like week 6 now, going into week 7 of the season?
Episode
And
7, so we
yeah,
must be.
yeah. And the numbers are already kind of back to where they've been the last couple seasons, which is really, really good, like solid 3, maybe solid 2 even on a really good team. But again, not quite into that top tier of starters yet. And we've known for a while he's got the capability to do that. But I guess I'll kind of start with you on this question, Spencer, because I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. We've never really talked about this, the two of us. So this will be the first time we're getting into this. Is it a little bit disappointing to see that Freddie Peralta still hasn't taken that next step, especially now when he's in a position where it seems like the Brewers kind of gave it to him as like, it's your job now, and we still haven't quite seen that next level of growth or that next step forward to really be like one of baseball's elite starters?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a bit disappointing at the very least. I think this year you've actually seen a bit of a step up in some of the stuff, but I think the command's kind of taken a step back from where we saw it, especially in the second half of last year. And that was the biggest difference for his season last year, was that he just started commanding the pitches. Well, he commanded pitches better. He obviously made his change with his slider as well at about the halfway point of last season. But what you saw in the second half was what you were hoping to see carry into this season, I think. And you just really haven't. Like you said, he got off to a fantastic start. He had one not so great outing, which may have been against Pittsburgh, I want to say. And
It
then
was,
obviously
yeah.
he ended up with
Mhm.
the suspension and the ejection, which was in the middle of probably one of his best starts of the season, was when he got ejected. And then he did not pitch very well in that game while he was appealing, and he served the suspension. And was this the first game back for him
It
off of
was,
the
yes.
suspension? Yeah.
So
So
I guess you could invoke the argument of, okay, maybe like the scheduling's been a little weird for him, but
yeah.
still, I mean, you're looking at a sample that's not restricted to that start.
Oh yeah. No. No. It's I think if he can hammer out a little bit of the command and get back to, I mean, he's just walking more people than he was early in the season. Um, Homers are always going to be part of his game, and it's the same thing as what we talked about with Myers and with Gasser. Because of the way the fastball is, sometimes players are going to run into it and it's going to go when they hit it hard in the air. Like that's just how it works. But the thing with him is if he's walking people, then those loud contact doubles and homers really kill him. And obviously, in this game, we're talking about he makes that play on the bunt. It could have been quite a bit different, too. I mean, that definitely changed some things, and that was his own doing. But it is interesting to look at it. I would say so far, I would say it's been a bit of a disappointment. I definitely, like you pointed out, it's still the numbers of a guy who's a good number two, but you were definitely hoping, I was definitely hoping to see him take that step and have I mean, 3-ish ERA, a little below, and I mean, the FIP and the Sierra kind of line up with that type of pitcher, but deserved run average has been pretty good since they created it, and the fact that that's a little higher than his ERA is interesting to me. Um, I'm guessing that the walks are hurting him in that regard, but I definitely wouldn't say I'm disappointed, but I'm a little disappointed in terms of like what I was really hoping we would see.
Yeah, it for me it comes back to what you touched on a couple minutes ago. Like the stuff has gotten even better now. This is the best his stuff has ever been, and I've kind of been following this since the start of the year. The induced vert on the fastball is up a couple inches, so it plays even better, but it's actually getting hit more than it has in recent years. Like his results on the fastball have not been great just because he's going through these lapses where he's not spotting it well.
Yeah.
The changeup is fading even more. He's added a couple inches of horizontal run to that pitch. He's really dialed in the slider again. The slider has been the one pitch that's actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting for him right now. He's throwing it more than he ever has before. And I think that's a good thing because it just signals he's becoming even more comfortable with that and just becoming a more well rounded pitcher. And he's found a shape with that pitch that now works for him, both in terms of being able to command it better and getting the results he's looking for with it. Because he was toying with it for a little bit for the past couple of years, trying to find one that worked best. But again, like when the stuff is now better than it's ever been before, and he's still going through some of the lapses that we've seen now for like 5 years of just, these stretches where the command kind of eludes him for a stretch of like 4 to 5 hitters at a time, maybe in the middle of the game. It is a little frustrating. And that's not to say he hasn't grown. He's definitely grown over the past few years. Like, I think he's gotten a lot better at making pitches under pressure and getting out of some jams. For as much as he might be prone to some of these stretches where things get away from him a little bit, he's also had a lot more moments where he does get himself into trouble and he gets out of it. Like,
Yep.
you can go back to that start in St. Louis where he got out of the bases loaded jam. Like, that's something that Freddie Peralta, a couple of years ago, maybe 3, 4 years ago, he probably doesn't get out of that. And he did this time because he was able to just lock in and make some good pitches there. But yeah, I guess for me, it's kind of like, when is that going to happen? Like we've been waiting for a while now.
Yeah.
And in the scale of, what's considered baseball players prime ages today, that's trending younger. And by that standard, Freddie Peralta's not like super young anymore. Like he's still under 30, obviously, but it's not like he's in his early 20s
Yeah.
still. And you're kind of like, well, he's got a couple more years to kind of iron this out. And you never know what exactly someone's career arc is going to look like. And again, these are still really, really good numbers. A lot of it comes down to just what, one, the expectations are, and two, what the ceiling is and what the talent level is and what you should be capable of. Like if Colin Ray had these kinds of numbers, I would be over the moon and singing his praises. Even if DL Hall had these kinds of numbers, I would be over the moon and singing these praises because those are different guys in terms of like where they're, in Hall's case, where they're at in their careers.
Yeah.
I would say Hall is still really high ceiling, but just where he's at in his career and experience. And then Colin Ray, who, seasoned veteran, but like he's not capable of being, an elite pitcher. That's just not in there. Like he can't do that. And people might get mad at me for saying, how dare you tell someone what he can and can't do, but like Colin Ray can't do that. Colin Ray just does not have the stuff to be a frontline starter, and he's not at a stage of his career where he's suddenly gonna, develop that. But what Colin Ray is he's a really good back end guy, and he's done a very, very nice job of knowing how to pitch that way. So again, like I think in terms of like expectations and capability, I think you could argue Colin Ray's doing a better job than Freddie Peralta is in that regard, just with what he has and what he's capable of and what he's getting out of that. But it's an interesting discussion just for Freddie because like you can tell like the jump has not quite been made yet. And there's still a lot of time left in the year. Like he absolutely could just dial it in right now. And we've seen it for stretches. Like if you look at the second half of last year, and I think kind of what you said, that's what we were hoping we'd see this year. And I think that's what the Brewers were hoping they would see this year as well. But it's not there yet. So, Freddie Peralta obviously is doing a solid job at the front of that rotation. I think he's just not quite living up to what the expectations were. And it's again, like when you have a guy that's that talented, the expectations are going to be very, very, very high. So we'll see if he, kind of dials in a little bit more and turns into a little bit more of that automatic guy that the Brewers have grown accustomed to having at the top of that rotation. So we'll see what happens with him. But we should probably wrap up talking about this Cardinals series now after that side tangent, which I think I actually labeled it in the agenda as side tangent. Yes, I
You
did.
sure? Yeah, you did.
I did. So it was a side tangent. But game 4, the Brewers were not able to complete the sweep. They lost to the Cardinals 4-3. It looked like they were on their way to a nice, easy sweep because they put a lot of pressure on Miles Mikolas in the first inning. They scored all 3 of their runs against him, made him throw 42 pitches in that first inning. Probably got the benefit of some strike calls that, or I should say, non-strike calls that probably should have been strikes. Christian Yelich, borderline. I think you can call that one a ball. Maybe it barely nicked the strike zone. The Rhys Hoskins walk was a strike. It was a strike and it got called ball for. So you got some favorable luck there, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But still putting pressure on him, making some good swing decisions in that inning. They scored 3. The inning ended when Rhys Hoskins was thrown out at home on a single by Gary Sanchez. I guess we can take a couple seconds quick to talk about that one. Controversial send by Jason Lane, at least on Brewers Twitter. I was 100% okay with it. I think that when you have the opportunity for a run there with 2 outs, you see what happens. I know Hoskins is probably one of the slowest guys in baseball, but you still try it. I mean, it took a perfect throw to get him. If that throw is offline, he scores. It's you got to keep putting the pressure on him. You don't know what's going to happen if Blake Perkins comes up next. Blake Perkins he's got like 1 hit in the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
Like the regression monster came hard and fast for him. So you just can't count on him doing something after that. Just make the send. Were you on the similar line of thinking, Spencer?
Yeah, I was pretty similar. I think the only argument you can make is that you might feel like Michaelis is basically at the end of his not the end at the end of his rope, but you could almost deliver the knockout blow on his entire outing if you're able to make him throw 10 more pitches in that inning, because a 50 pitch inning, it's pretty hard to just get back up and go sit down and then get back up and pitch again after that. So I could hear that argument, but I would imagine in your head you're also thinking, well, we're doing pretty well against them right now. Why wouldn't that be able to continue anyway into the future? And obviously Hoskins' speed plays a role in all of it too. But like you said, if that throw is up the line either direction at all, he's safe. He's going to be safe. So it was a perfect throw. I guess in that position, I'm probably sending him 2, and that's kind of how I have to look at it. So I can't be upset about it. I would have understood if he held him, but I also am not going to be upset that he didn't in that spot.
Yeah, I understand what people are getting at when they say, well, if you can get that pitch count up a little bit more, you get him out of the game. But again, to me, that's contingent on Blake Perkins reaching base and just everything you know about number 1, Blake Perkins right now. But number 2, just the run scoring environment in baseball.
Yeah.
The odds are like never in your favor of scoring more runs with the way that this is all mapped out now. And that's probably not 100% accurate if you actually looked at like a run expectancy matrix. But I'd venture to guess 2 outs. You got Blake Perkins coming up. No matter who's batting, like you're going to have an on-base percentage below 500. So like at any given moment, your odds of pushing a run across, another run across there, passing the baton and trying to score that way, they're not great.
Yeah.
And you just add in now like the current offensive environment of baseball where run scoring is just dead. Like you have an opportunity in front of you there to score, and I think you have to take it every single time. So I had no problem with it. Unfortunately, Miles Michaelis, after throwing 42 pitches in that first inning, shut the Brewers down the rest of the way on 53 pitches over his next five. And the Brewers ended up losing this game because the Cardinals were able to mount a comeback. They scored a run in 3 consecutive innings to end up taking the lead, and they hung on to this one. Pat Murphy kind of chewed out his offense a little bit after this one. Not in post game, but the day after, in his pregame media session, he was kind of like, look, man, that's not acceptable. We got to keep putting pressure on him. It just kind of felt like we, had some drive in that first inning, and then he said that we weren't relentless after that. We just didn't keep going. We let him settle in, and that's why we lost this game. But on the pitching side, things weren't exactly great for the Brewers in this game either. Probably worse than the 4 runs allowed would indicate. Paul Goldschmidt did some damage for the Cardinals in this game. He was having a really, really tough time going into this one. He was staring down, well, not staring down, he was past an 0 for 30 at that point, 0
Yep.
for his last 30 something. I can't remember exactly what it
He,
was.
he was 0 for 32 when he singled off McGill in the ninth of that third game.
Okay, so that's right. He did break it the night before because he got that base hit. But he woke up a little bit more in this game. He hit a solo home run in the fifth off Bryce Wilson, and then a game tying single in the sixth inning off Jared Koenig. And then Michael Ciani doubled off the top of the wall against Elvis Peguero in the seventh, and that's what gave the Cardinals that 4-3 lead that they would hold on to. Going back to Wilson, he pitched really poorly in this outing. Like, I'm just gonna say it. The line in terms of earned runs looks okay. He was really, really bad, and he should have had more runs on the board against him than the 2 he allowed. So Wilson went 4 innings, the 2 earned runs. He only struck out 1. He allowed 5 hits. He walked 5. And here's my favorite stat from this outing. Bryce Wilson's hard hit rate was higher than his strike rate. So Bryce Wilson threw 42 of his 80 pitches for strikes. That's 52.5%. And then 62.5% of the batted balls he allowed, which was a lot because he only had the 1 strikeout. 62.5% of those batted balls were hard hit. So Bryce Wilson was not throwing a lot of strikes, and he was putting guys on base who didn't need to be on base. And then when he was throwing strikes, they were crushing the ball against him. And fortunately, a lot of those found some gloves. So now Wilson has a very interesting looking line as a starting pitcher. We kind of talked about this on last episode about how we both think that after seeing him get the ball a few times as a traditional starter, he's got the arsenal to do it. And I still think that's true. I'm not really looking a whole lot into these results because, again, it's only 5 games. But it's still a funny line to look at. He's got a 1.88 ERA in 5 starts, but he has a 4.69 FIP. So you're looking at a difference of almost 3 runs there. He has an 18% strikeout rate against a 14% walk rate, both of which are well below average. And he's basically getting by because he has a 203 batting average on balls in play. So just a unsustainably high percentage of batted balls finding gloves so far. Again, I don't think there's really a takeaway from this so much as it's just kind of a funny, small sample size line to look at. But it does kind of show you, like, Bryce Wilson has not been executing pitches very well his last couple starts. And he did talk about post game what he felt the mechanical issue was for him in this Cardinals start. He basically said that his upper half and his lower half just were not synced up in this game. He was missing up and arm side a lot with his fastballs, and he basically said what was happening was, he was getting out in front with his lower half, so his lower half was driving, but it was like ahead of his upper half. So what happens then is your upper half, if it's behind your lower half, it's kind of following, trying to catch up. But if think about it, like if your arm is dragging behind as you're like supposed to be coming through, that's when that ball is going to kind of pop out early, and that's when you're going to see it sail up an arm side like that. So he said it's just something that he needs to work on, and he's hoping he'll have that corrected for his next start. Spencer, fellow pitching coach, do you have anything else you want to talk about mechanically there? Or did I get it right?
No, you nailed it. I think he was missing glove side and down a lot too, which also makes sense when you're out of sync. It's just all kind of on that plane from the arm coming through
Yeah.
either early or late. So
Yeah,
if
it
he wasn't
was
able to get synced up, that would add up for sure with
yeah, it
where he
was
was missing. But
it was
yeah,
the
I thought,
fastballs that were missing up and arm side, and then like the soft stuff like the breaking balls, he was kind of
yeah,
spiking it to the glove side. So
yeah, no, that makes sense for sure if that was the issue, and that would definitely be a good reason for it. I do just want to say 10 base runners in 4 innings with only 2 earned runs is just absolutely absurd. That is,
It really is,
it's
yes.
a hilarious line to have. The fact that he got through it, I wouldn't even say he deserves credit for because, like you said, he was mostly getting the ball smoked right at people. Like he wasn't really doing anything to wiggle himself out of this damage that he had, or
Yeah.
out of these bad situations he had created on his own. So, yeah, it would have been cool if the Brewers could have taken advantage of that type of luck, I would say, but it's baseball, man. It happens.
That was definitely one of those outings where, if you talk to like Murphy, like we talked to Murphy after the game and he kind of delivered the cliche line of, well, he made pitches when he needed to. But that's one of those lines where no one in the room actually believes that's what happened, and you kind of just got to say something positive.
Yeah.
Um, just kind of throw a baseballism out there, but he wasn't even making pitches when he needed to. He was just wiggling off because someone hit a smash right at someone, which that'll happen sometimes. It's definitely part of the game, but maybe not a sustainable strategy moving forward. So Bryce Wilson's going to continue to get starts in this rotation, though. Hopefully, he can kind of dial in that command a little bit more. And again, even that 4.69 FIP, that's still like back of the rotation material,
Oh,
just in
yeah.
terms of a guy who you send out and say, hey, just give us 5 innings and try to keep us in the game. Like he can do that. So it's not like we're just dumping on Bryce Wilson here, but he got away with one that outing. He did. But moving on to the next series against the Pirates, they came to town after the Cardinals and the Brewers winning that series as well. Not before losing game one, though, their second straight loss. Pirates scoring 8 in this game, Brewers scoring 6. The headliner out of the many, many things that happened in this game, Reese Hoskins leaving after his first at bat with a right hamstring strain. He got a base hit, and as we were watching, he kind of pulled up funny as he was starting to round the bag. He did confirm after the game that was when he felt it, and he stayed out there for one pitch, but after that, it became pretty evident that he was having a tough go of it out there. So the Brewers making the call to pull him. Blake Perkins pinch ran and stayed in the game. Jake Bauers moving to first base for the rest of this one. Hoskins is looking at a 2 to 4 week absence. He was initially going to get a second opinion, but he ended up deciding that he had seen everything he needed to from the first opinion. There just wasn't a need for it. So the Brewers placed him on the IL shortly after that. They did it before the start of the game that day, but it was a little bit of a last minute decision. Owen Miller was with the team as a member of the taxi squad, so he took his spot on the roster. Again, looking like 2 to 4 weeks for Hoskins. He's hoping that he can come back without needing a rehab assignment, but we'll see kind of how that whole recovery process plays for him. Big part of this Brewers lineup, so definitely a big loss for him. But they do have some other guys in that lineup who are starting to step up a little bit, and we'll get to that. But first, we'll talk about Colin Ray a little bit getting the start in this one. It looked like it was going to be a rough day for him, but in typical Colin Ray fashion, he found a way to just keep going, and the Brewers were still in the game. That's kind of the whole Colin Ray vibe. That's basically his whole job on the staff. One way or another, he is going to get you through 5, maybe 6 innings, and you will still be in the game. That's what he did today, and he did it in a much different way than he has in a lot of his starts. So Colin Ray went 6 innings, 3 earned runs in this one, struck out 5, and only walked 1. But he was getting hit very, very hard early in the game, especially on his sinker, including the only home run that he gave up this game, which was a 2-run shot to Jack Sawinski in the first inning. And after they were doing a lot of damage on those sinkers, Colin Ray, seeing that these lefties were hitting the sinkers, went to his split changeup, which is a pitch that he has very rarely used as a Brewer. Going into this start, his usage rate was about 5.5%, which is right where it was the year before. He talked about in spring training how this is a pitch he was working on trying to incorporate more, and he finally did it in this outing, basically out of necessity. He threw his changeup or splitter, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a hybrid, basically. It's a split change. Um, but he threw it almost 30% of the time after he got into that batting order for the second time through the rest of that game. So he threw it a lot, and it was a very, very effective pitch. Got several swings and misses on it, including the first sequence where he really broke it out. He struck out O'Neill Cruz, and all 3 swinging strikes in that at bat came on splitters. So it was a really effective pitch for him. It's got, I think, good enough characteristics to be effective. I've wanted to see him use it more for a little bit now, so it was nice to see him break it out. I asked him about it after the game in the clubhouse, and he basically said, yeah, this was, an adjustment that we realized we needed to make. So this was the time to break it out. He said, some nights we might go to the curveball more if we're looking for the change of pace, but we felt that tonight the splitter was going to be a good way to do that. And it basically saved his outing. Just the fact that he was able to change the mix that way. And Pat Murphy just kind of reiterated, like, this is what makes him such a reliable innings eater. He's got so many different tricks in that bag and so many different ways that he can, kind of fine tune the sequence and figure out just the right way to attack guys to keep guys off of pitches. And that was definitely what he did in this outing. So, really nice job for Colin Ray keeping the Brewers in this game. Unfortunately, it wouldn't matter because Thiago Vieira, Mitch White, and Yoel Payamps all giving up runs out of the bullpen. But the Brewers still showing some fight. They did a lot better job on this homestand, or at least in the Pirates series, of showing that relentlessness that Pat Murphy kind of called them out on in the final game of the Cardinals series. They did a much better job against Pittsburgh, including in this game where they at one point cut the deficit to 1 run when Jake Bauers hit a grand slam in the 8th inning. And this is now the part of the program where we're going to give Jake Bauers some love, and I'm going to gloat a little bit because Jake Bauers obviously had a very rough start to the year. He was someone who I was extremely high on going into the year. I loved the trade for Jake Bauers. I just loved what we saw from him in New York in terms of some of the underlying metrics. The quality of contact when he put the ball in play as a Yankee was about as authoritative as it can get. Like he had, granted, not a lot of playing time due to injuries and kind of the makeup of that roster, but when he did play, the kinds of damage he was doing when he put the ball in play was like at the top of the league. So there was very much something to work with here in terms of the raw power, and now it started to show up, especially after he switched from the leg kick to a toe tap in recent weeks, and that really seems to have locked the timing in for him. But Jake Bauers, as of this recording, now has a 123 weighted runs created plus, which is pretty good. He has a 344 weighted on base average, and that's supported by a 358 expected weighted on base average based on his StatCast data. So strikeouts, walks, and then quality of contact. That all supports what he's doing and says he probably could have even been a little bit better based on the kind of at-bats he's having. He has a 14% barrel rate on batted balls. His average exit velocity is 91.6 miles an hour. His expected weighted on base average on contact is 533, which puts him in the top 2% of all MLB hitters. And then finally, 52% of his balls in play are within the sweet spot launch angle range, according to StatCast. So basically, what that's measuring is if you get a ball in the sweet spot of the bat, it's going to come off the bat at a certain angle, usually as like a solid line drive. His sweet spot percentage is the best in baseball among hitters who have hit at least 50 batted balls. So Jake Bauers is really hitting the ball with authority when he's putting it in play. The strikeout rate is still really, really high, but it's started to creep down a little bit in recent weeks after he made that change. And even if it stays where it is right now, which is, I think he's at like a 35% K rate, and the whiff rate is right around 30%, that's still near the bottom of the league. It's also still miles better than what we've seen from guys like Keston Hiura. I'm going to start a firestorm here by invoking Keston Hiura. Keston Hiura would strike out about 40% of the time, and he would whiff on about 40% of his swings. 40% and 30% on the whiff rate. That's a huge difference. I'm okay with guys who swing and miss a lot. I just think there's a certain line that when you get to this line, as in you're swinging and missing at this rate or higher, that's the point where you've kind of gone beyond the point of no return and you're just not making enough contact to consistently have results, no matter how good that contact may be when you do put it in play. Jake Bauers is below the line right now. He's still swinging and missing a lot, but he's making enough contact to the point that he can produce because that contact is so good. At least that's the way that I look at it. Spencer, you got any thoughts on Jake Bauers?
No, I mean, I told you this before we started, but you were the one who convinced me on Bauers coming into the season. So obviously, when we made the trade, I went and looked at some of the metrics and stuff from his Yankees career, and it was clear that he had started impacting the ball a lot more than he did earlier in his career. But the strikeouts did stand out as a pretty big concern, and the whiffs, and the fact that a lot of even the expected stuff wasn't great, which meant he probably wasn't hitting it at the ideal launch angles and all of that stuff. Right now, he's got a 52% sweet spot rate, which is what you talked about. It's the best in all of baseball, like you said. That's a guy who's making hard contact and doing it exactly how you want hard contact to be done, which is in the air with authority. And I mean, we should point out that grand slam was off a lefty as well, which he's barely had any at bats against any lefties this season, and he was able to have a pretty long at bat there and then hit a grand slam. Brought him within one at the time, obviously, but no, he's he looks like a guy who absolutely deserves to be in the lineup as often as you can have him in the lineup. And the Brewers made this trade with the idea that they needed to add more power to the lineup. That was a big goal of the entire offseason. And right now, it's pretty hard to argue with the results they've gotten so far in that regard. And that can include Hoskins and Gary Sanchez and all these guys who have been adding pop to the lineup. But Bauers was kind of the unknown one amongst all of those guys, where the rest of them were big names, at least names people recognized, proven names. And Bauers was not. He was a guy who had been tossed around from org to org. He was on minor league deals with the Yankees. He looks like he's figured some things out. And since that toe tap, especially, it's really exploded. So it's fun to watch. I hope the toe tap really did unlock the true ceiling that Bauers has, because if he's striking out, whiffing less than he was, and still making that type of hard contact, like that's a legitimate. I mean, that's a guy who could hit in the middle of an order. That's a really, really good bat. So it's been really good to see.
I was trying my hardest to fire up the Jake Bauers hype train and get people knowing who Jake Bauers was going into the year. Granted, there's only so much one guy can do, but I don't think anyone ever really realized this. And like this was the way I was thinking about it from the start. Like he was always a very, very big part of what the Brewers are trying to do with this lineup in the way that they were trying to reshape it to have more power. Like before they traded for Jake Bauers well before they signed Rhys
Yeah,
Hoskins. They didn't know that they were going to be able to land Rhys Hoskins.
right.
Like it was always going to be Jake Bauers is going to be hitting in the middle of this order. He's going to get a lot of playing time at first base. We're counting on him to be a big power bat for us. And I was telling some people before the start of the season, I think Jake Bauers is going to hit, if not 30 home runs, pretty close to it because he's going to get playing time in this lineup. I fully believe in the power. I think he can make enough contact to the point where that power is going to play. It's always going to be a lot of swing and miss, but I think he can keep it to a level where it's not to his detriment. And that's what we're seeing right now, especially now with the toe tap. But a lot of these changes that he made, they went back to when he was with the Yankees. I talked to him about it in spring training. He said, he closed off his stance a little bit, so he's more parallel now in the box. He's changed the positioning of his hands. He said they changed his swing path as well. It's coming through the zone flatter now, and it's more direct to the ball, so he's just able to make better impact when he's making contact. Just all these different things, and it's a process. It adds up over time. And now he came to Milwaukee, and there's one more adjustment that they had to make with the toe tap, and now that's really seemingly gotten that timing to where it needs to be, where he's catching the ball in the right spot and he's hitting for power now. And like you talked about, again, just going back to that sweet spot rate, he's impacting the ball exactly how you would want anyone to impact the ball, especially a guy, though, who hits it hard. He's
Yeah,
hitting it, like you said, in the air, but not like in the air to the point that he's getting under the ball.
right.
Like he's driving line drives or slightly lower fly balls with a lot of backspin. And that's the kind of contact that you want to see. And he's definitely doing that right now. So Jake Bauers, very nice to see him start to produce in the middle of this order. And he's still going to be a very big part of it now, especially if you're looking at a multiple week absence from Rhys Hoskins. Bauers is going to get a lot of playing time at first base now. And we can talk a little bit later about what that mix is going to look like. But we probably should finish that Pirates series really quick here. Game 2, the Brewers defeating the Pirates 4-3, snapping that very brief 2-game skid, if you want to call it a skid. All 4 runs from Milwaukee coming in the second inning in this one. Sal Frelick hitting a 2-run home run. Bryce Terang hitting an RBI single, and then Christian Yelich also hitting an RBI single. Joe Ross doing a nice job in this game. He went 5, 2 hits, 2 earned runs, both of which came on a home run by Nick Gonzalez in the 4th. Other than that, he did a really strong job. Only walked 1, struck out 6. The velo was good for him. He was getting a lot of swing and miss. Like Joe Ross had a whiff rate of, I think it was 44% in this game. And he was really getting a lot of swing and miss too, with a lot of high four seamers. It's a
Mm-hmm.
lefty heavy lineup for Pittsburgh. So we saw him change things up in that way. Went to a lot of high four seamers, also mixed the changeup in a lot more than we're used to as well. Kind of a theme in this series with all those left handed bats that Pittsburgh has. The Brewers, one of the least frequent changeup users in all of baseball as a staff, but they were kind of able to modify the game plan a little bit and pull out some of those forgotten pieces in their arsenals to help put the Pirates away in this series. So he did a really nice job. And then Brian Hudson, Elvis Peguero, and Trevor McGill got the job done in relief to close it out. But Peguero got a very big assist from Sal Frelick, who made quite possibly one of the better catches I've seen in person at a baseball game. Andrew McCutchen hit a triple-digit exit velo line drive into the gap in left center. Frelick to break this catch down. So it's over Frelick's shoulder, obviously. So he not only needed to run back with a nearly perfect route, but then also to get the kind of vertical and to get the kind of extension he got on a leap backwards, all as he's trying to track this ball. Just a really, really tremendous catch. And I think everyone in that stadium was kind of floored just seeing what had happened. Like there was kind of a little bit of a pause, and then he stood up and the place just erupted. Just a really, really tremendous catch from Sal Frelick. Spencer, what was your reaction when that moment happened?
I don't want to be that guy, but I'm curious if you saw this. Do you know what the catch probability was on that play?
I do not. I have not seen the catch probability.
It was 85%.
Does
So
that take positioning into account?
it does.
Okay.
So I will say on the replay, I thought the jump was pretty iffy, but like you said, the route could not have been like he took the perfect route and the athleticism to make the catch at the end of it. It's still an incredible catch. I mean, I just thought it was kind of funny when I saw the catch probability pop up on Twitter yesterday. I was like, really? That was 85% because I thought he did everything well. But I did think even when I saw the first replay, it was funny because the announcers were like, look at the jump he got. And I saw him like freeze and also kind of like stutter step a little bit and then start turning and running. And I was like, well, I don't know that he did get a great jump there, but it was a tremendous catch that really showed the athleticism that he has more than anything else. And I do think that's actually been the one thing for him defensively is I don't think his routes are bad at all. I think he takes really good routes. And he is a really good athlete. If I had to say there's something that's lacking, I do think he gets rough reads out there at times. And I also think you can trace a lot of that back to that Ellie De La Cruz inside the Parker. I really think he stopped trusting his reads after that for a while. And he's been a little bit more hesitant to just take off on contact because that play, if people remember it, he dove for a ball that he was nowhere near getting to. And Ellie was able to circle the bases with ease. And since then, he's had a lot of balls kind of fall in front of him that I was thinking he should go after harder and all that stuff. So I know I turned an opportunity to talk about a great play into kind of ripping on his defense, but I did think it was interesting on the catch probability part of it. And then also, I don't want to take away from it because regardless of the jump, he made up for it by doing everything else perfectly, and he made a catch that most people still wouldn't have made regardless of the jump. I mean, it was a great play from him, and at the very least, this game seemed to be a really good boost for his confidence, which has been something that seems to be lacking for him recently, and it carried over into Game 3, I would say.
Yeah, we'll get to game three in a minute here. First, we'll talk about a roster move that the Brewers made before that game. Oliver Dunn was optioned to AAA Nashville, and outfielder Chris Roller was called up. He'd make his MLB debut in this game. So, probably time for our first question. And this is a very good question that a lot of people are probably going to need to know for the next couple days at the very least, however long Chris Roller's up here. McNamo3 asks, what is a Chris Roller? Spencer, would you like to tell us what a Chris Roller is?
Yeah, it's well, if you have like a big row of Chris's on the ground and you need to flatten them, you just take that thing and you go right over the top. That's a Chris Roller. No, he is so Chris Roller, the player on the Brewers, was acquired from I want to say the Guardians last year. I probably should have looked this up before, but I think he was traded. He was a trade with the Guardians, just a small minor league trade. I think it was for cash, and known for really, really good defense in the outfield, like a plus defender. Pretty good speed, but just gets great jumps, great routes. It's not too dissimilar from kind of what they saw in a Blake Perkins when they first went out and got Perkins, but on the offensive side of things, Roller probably has less to dream on than what Blake had, even when he was signed, and also what we've seen since he did come up to the majors. Really, he's here to be, I would guess, a defensive fill-in, potentially a pinch runner in a certain spot. If they want to move people around and they need an outfielder to enter the game, that's what he's here for. But there's, I would say you're mostly banking on the glove, and I would not expect much offensively from him. This is more of it feels to me like more of a placeholder for them to figure out what they want to do when Yelich gets healthier and they feel like he can play left regularly instead of having to DH as much. And all of that stuff is factoring in here. But Bauers having to play first more often with Hoskins' injury probably made them feel like they should have an extra outfielder as well. So, yeah, that is what a Chris Roller is.
The Brewers are undefeated in the Chris Roller era, and they have a pretty solid run differential per game in the Chris Roller era, because the Chris Roller era began with a 10-2 Brewers victory in which they hit 5 home runs against Martin Perez. Granted, Chris Roller did not hit one of the 5 home runs, but he was there on the roster, in the lineup even, for some of these home runs.
Yeah.
So William Contreras got it started with a homer. Gary Sanchez hit a homer. Sal Frelick hitting his second homer in as many days after he only hit 3 home runs over his first, what was it? I tweeted about it. It was like 375 plate appearances with 3 home runs, and now he's hit 2 in 2 days. Joey Ortiz joining the party with a home run himself, but perhaps the most impressive one was off the bat of Jackson Chourio. He capped off the homer parade with a 441 shot into the Miller Lite landing in left center on a changeup that was basically down the middle, but again, like just weighted back on it and put a swing on it that really was not super exaggerated. Again, like you could tell he swung hard, but like he didn't fly open. There wasn't like a crazy amount of movement. Like not one of those like super violent swings that you might see from like a Joey Weimer when he's really trying to get into one. So again, just really more example of how crazy that raw power is for Chourio and how controlled it can be too. And we kind of talked about this off pod after that moment happened. But as soon as Chourio hit that home run, I'm like, yeah, he's just got to play every day up here.
Yep.
Like, unless the numbers really get bad and he's like in his own head, which I don't think that's happened yet. And I really don't think it will. I don't think there's anything for him to learn, even from a trip to Nashville. Like the potential here and the skill set and everything is just so good that it is legitimately best for his development as a player that he just sees MLB pitching almost every day for as long as the Brewers can make this work. And it's going to take some time before we see results. Like I don't think he's going to hit much for the just about the entirety of the first half here at least. Maybe we start to see some strides in the second half. That's kind of what he did in Biloxi last year after he got half a season's worth of baseball in at a higher level. Things just kind of clicked for him all of a sudden. And you can talk about the change of the ball there as well, but just approach wise too, and plate discipline and everything. It was all better across the board. But I feel like it's a similar situation here where it's just you keep seeing these glimpses where you can see what he can do. And it still seems like when he gets a mistake, for the most part, he's still doing damage on it. He's still hitting it. You're still seeing the things you want to see from him. It's just a matter of refining some things around the edges. So where I'm at is like he still needs to be in there every day. I think that just with everything else that's going on in this lineup, you're in a position where you can make that work, even if he does struggle a little bit day to day. But just really impressive display of power from him. I don't know where you're at right now, just with his development and kind of what his role needs to be in this lineup.
Yeah, I think since Pat gave him his whatever he wanted to call it, his time off in terms of, learning a lesson or having to be held accountable, I believe is how he kind of phrased it. It's looked better to me. I think he's been a little bit more in control with his swings, like you mentioned. The homer that he hit, I just looked it up while you were talking. It was a 76.5 mile per hour swing, bat speed wise, and we've seen Chourio get up to 86 this year on some of his swings. So he's capable of really going crazy with the bat speed. And that to me is just more in control. And he still hit the ball 441 feet. So that shows the type of power he possesses. It seems like he's been a little bit less willing to just go after a breaking ball just because he sees a breaking ball since he came back. I wasn't a huge fan, I'll say, of the idea of sitting him for those 4 days or whatever it ended up being, 4 or 5 games. But so far, I would say the returns on it have been pretty decent. And I know he talked about it yesterday a little bit, saying it made him appreciate every opportunity, basically every time he goes out there a little bit more, where he's not worried about as much, where it's more just like, all right, I'm out here to go and do my job and to play, and I don't need to try and do anything special. I just need to be in control. And I know Murph kind of talked about it and said he was trying to get him to watch some of the vets and watch some of the older players and see how they operate at the major league level day to day. And if he was able to learn from that, then would be fantastic. And so far, I'd say the early returns are decent. And I know you talked about how in AA last year it was a slow start and then a really solid second half, especially as July. I mean, when they switched from the pre-tech baseballs to the not pre-tech baseballs, he kind of went crazy for that month. But he has shown the ability to adjust, and I think he's just doing it again here. And that type of power, it had been, I believe, 24 days or something since he had hit a homer. I think we're going to start seeing some power show up for him a little bit more often. It was really nice, honestly, to see him pull a ball like that with that type of power. That's a good sign to me that he's starting to feel more comfortable because there's no hesitation. There's some of the pitches he hit to like right and right center for his homers early in the season. It's incredible that he could hit them that direction because they weren't even like outside pitches that you would normally. He almost inside outed them to the other parts of the ballpark. And that's an impressive thing to do, but it also to me is a bit of a sign of somebody who's not necessarily trusting what they're seeing and turning on a pitch that's inside or on the inner half. And like you said, this was a changeup right down the middle, but it was still good to see him really turn and burn on one and crush it. And that's a really good sign to me that he's starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. And it's going to be ups and downs. He's going to have some more rough stretches. It's going to be some stretches where you might think he's breaking out, and it might not be. He might just be having a little bit of a good week, and it's just going to be up and down for a while. But you keep seeing the glimpses. You're getting whatever you can ask for from a 20-year-old in his first stint in Major League Baseball. As long as you're seeing glimpses like we are, I don't think you can expect much more than that.
One rookie for the Brewers who has had far more ups than downs so far, not really any downs so far, is Joey Ortiz, who, like we said, homered in this game as well. We're really starting to see more power from him as well, on top of just the improved plate discipline and the defense. Tyler asks us if they actually allow Ortiz to start most days, which should be the case now that Ollie Dunn is back in Nashville. Could he end up having a sneaky case as an all-star? Most of the quote-unquote normal top options at the hot corner are off to rough starts, and Ortiz has been phenomenal in the field and in the box. I agree with all that. I don't really think there's a huge case for him as an all-star, and I think a lot of it's going to come down to if you look at the third base position right now, you're right. A lot of the guys who are usually at the top are not having good seasons, but the guys who are also with Ortiz at the top instead are Alec Boehm in Philadelphia and Max Muncy in LA. And those are guys who are absolutely going to be getting a ton of votes from their fan bases to start in the All-Star game or just to make the roster. And I think those guys have a much better shot than Joey Ortiz right now. That's not to say he's not going to make it. You know, maybe he does get selected if he continues to do a really nice job. There's always the injury replacements or availability replacements, whatever you want to call it. So maybe, but I'm not going to count on it. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know what you think, Spencer.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think based strictly off of what he's doing, he has a case, especially for like not the starting spot at third necessarily, because a guy like Boehm has been better overall so far offensively, and somehow he's grading out a little better defensively in most metrics, which is pretty shocking given what we've seen from Alec Boehm in the past. But at the very least, right now, instead of an all-star bid, I would say if Imanaga didn't exist right now and what he's doing for the Cubs, Joey Ortiz would be pushing himself towards a case for a Rookie of the Year possibility. It's going to take, obviously, there's a lot more season left, and he's going to have to do that for quite a bit longer. But it is funny because right before the season, it was clarified that the Brewers would be eligible for that prospect, the whatever the PPE, whatever it stands for exactly, but the pick that the Brewers could get if he were to win Rookie of the Year, and that they wouldn't be for Churio. And at the time, I think a lot of fans were like, oh man, there goes our chance. And in a way, it kind of looks like Ortiz is the chance now to potentially get that pick. He's just, I mean, we're talking about a 154 WRC plus right now. Like nobody saw that coming. And I was high on Ortiz before we traded for him. I had people ask me what I would want, and Kobe Mayo was my number one. And I said the other headliner that felt reasonable or possible in that trade was Ortiz. I liked Ortiz a lot. I thought the power was going to come. He obviously has to elevate. He still could elevate the ball more often than he is right now, but he is hitting the ball hard. His plate discipline numbers have improved dramatically from where they were in AAA. He's at 14.3% walk rate right now, which is amongst the best in baseball. And he's only striking out 17.9% of the time. I mean, he's doing everything you want offensively. We've talked about the hands he has defensively. I think the one spot he could probably improve is reads at third base. I think laterally he doesn't get the greatest jump sometimes, but you also have to consider that he's mostly played middle infield his whole career, and that can be something that takes a little bit of time getting used to moving to a corner and getting reads off the bat because it's a lot different than what you would see at short or at second. So, yeah, he's just been fantastic. He's a guy who absolutely needs to play every day. He's hitting righties and lefties just fine so far, and it's been it's been pretty fun to see. And it's definitely getting to that point where it's even making me a little bit more comfortable with the idea of the Willie Adames most likely being gone after the season and him stepping into that role potentially. Willie is still incredible. I love Willie Adames. I would love to keep Willie Adames if the Brewers can, but it's giving me a little bit more comfort knowing that Ortiz is the guy waiting in the wings when we hadn't had that coming into this offseason.
Couple more notes from this series finale against the Pirates. William Contreras and Sal Frelick. We talked about how they homered earlier in the game, but they also ended up finishing, each of them finishing, I should say, a leg shy of the cycle. Contreras was missing the double, Frelick was missing the triple, and Contreras came up in his final at bat and hit a laser straight back up the middle to center field that got caught.
I thought
So
he had it off the bat.
you certainly can't knock him for trying. He did everything he could, but he did end up falling short of that cycle. Robert Gasser making his second start. He went 5 innings in this one, navigated some more traffic, 6 hits and a walk. But again, overall, some pretty solid stuff. Only the 2Ks for him. That's been probably the one knock on him so far, that he hasn't gotten a lot of swing and miss. And he even said that after the game against the Pirates, that, yeah, I haven't gotten the swing and miss yet, but I think that's going to come. So I'm not really worrying about that yet. And he's probably right. But we did see more cutters in this one. Murphy and Gasser both kind of said that it was a nice job by Sanchez working that pitch in a little bit more, especially as he saw what some of the swings looked like. We saw a couple more changeups too. Again, just with some of the righties Pittsburgh had in that lineup now. They had their righty heavy version of their lineup against the lefty that day. It was a solid outing for Robert Gasser. And I think the one thing we kind of talked about, how there might be some bumps for him. I think one thing that you talked about, Spencer, was the home runs, but what I see more is only one walk in 2 outings so far. That is not going to continue. He had some control struggles in the
Yes.
minor leagues, and I don't think those magically went away at this point. I think we are going to see some outings where he really is just fighting the control. And he only walked one in this game, but if you actually look at pitch by pitch where the targets were and where a lot of these balls ended up, his command was not good in this
No.
outing. Sanchez, again, because they're facing all these righties, pretty much every target, especially for hard stuff, was inside. And almost every four-seamer he threw ended up like top of the zone outside.
Yeah.
And a lot of them still caught the zone, but he was missing by the entire width of the plate. It worked. That doesn't mean it was the game plan, though, and it doesn't mean that he did a great job. Again, he was in the strike zone enough, so that's great that you're not giving up the free base runners. But again, facing a lineup in Pittsburgh that has been one of the worst in baseball, he actually got two really, really good matchups to start
Yeah.
his career. We talked about the Cardinals, but Pittsburgh is arguably just as good of a matchup for him, if not better, because they have like what, two guys in that lineup who have an OPS over 580. It's
Yeah.
don't quote me on that, but it's not good.
No.
Just being there for that entire series and seeing some of those OPSs on the video board was interesting. But again, we are going to see outings where stuff like that does come back to hurt him a little bit more, and it does show up in the form of walks, not so much as missing within the strike zone, but just missing the zone completely. But again, can't complain about what you've seen from Robert Gasser so far in terms of results. And I think even if the results lined up with the way he pitched in that second outing, I think we can still come out of that saying, there were some positive signs there.
Yeah.
Again, a young pitcher who already is the product of the Brewers development system, just getting a better understanding of how to work his stuff. So with that, we'll kind of move on to some loose ends here, try to get things moving here for the rest of the pod. That was a long recap. We talked about the transaction of sending Ollie Dunn down, calling up Chris Roller. He'd make his debut. Another Brewer to make their first appearance in Milwaukee was Mitch White, who was acquired earlier in the week on waivers. Corbin Martin was designated for assignment to make room on the 40-man. Mitch White is basically here to eat some innings out of the bullpen. especially as the Brewers are trying to get a little bit healthier on that pitching staff. So I don't think he's going to be, a Brewers reclamation project so much as just a guy who can give them some innings. And he's done that already. He was the one who finished off that final game in that Pittsburgh series, pitching 2 innings. As far as Mitch White as a pitcher, just what constitutes Mitch White, we're going to deconstruct Mitch White now for a couple seconds. But basically, really, really bad fastballs. The sweeper, I think, is a legitimately good pitch. I think it's a plus pitch. And we actually saw him turn to it quite a bit in his 2 inning outing to finish up that series finale against Pittsburgh. He had a lot of swing and miss with it, but the fastballs are just not. It's not it, man. He's got two of them. He's got the four seamer and the sinker. They're both really bad. Velo wise, they're okay, but just everything from the movement to his arm slots and how those factors interact with each other and just his location. It's not. They're really, really bad fastballs. So he's really just here to eat some innings, and then we'll see what happens a week or two from now if the Brewers still have a use for him on the pitching staff. But I wouldn't expect a whole lot from him. Moving on to a couple of questions that we got here that we didn't already address. WI Sports 87 asks us, Jack and Spencer had early season concerns about how Murphy was using the bullpen. Where are we at now? Spencer, you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I'm obviously there's always going to be nitpicking opportunities for bullpen usage, but I feel a lot more comfortable with how he's been managing the pen. Basically, since we really started, when we really started laying it out, how we were bothered by what he was doing, he kind of stopped doing what we were talking about. So for the most part, he's been willing to go to the lower leverage guys, especially when they're down by 1 or 2 runs. And he's been willing to do it even when they might be up by a couple runs. And it certainly helps that the Brewers have won a few of these games pretty handedly, and he's been able to use them without any risk. But for the most part, I would say I'm feeling a lot better about how he's doing it. And it's good to see. And we said it at the time, there was always opportunity for him to learn from some of these things. And that's all we were trying to point out. But do I think he's been perfect? No. Do I think it's improved quite a bit from where it was at that time when we were especially concerned about it? In my opinion, yes. I don't know about you, Jack.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think it's fine now. I there really hasn't been a moment for me over these last couple weeks now where I've been like, what is he doing? I mean, there's always going to be like certain matchup related moves, but I'm usually not one to get nitpicky about like a matchup in a specific
Yeah.
situation because there's so many factors that go into that. And at the end of the day, like if you're going to get through a season, especially with the makeup of this pitching staff, like everyone's just going to have to pitch
Yep.
in a variety of situations. Like there are going to be times where you're just going to have to use the guy who maybe, at least by some arguments, may not be the best option for this spot, but he's just going to have to pitch then. For me, it always really just comes down more so to the pacing and the workload management. And like we talked about, I don't think that was very good the first couple of weeks, but now, you know, for a couple different reasons, I do think just the kind of games they've been playing it's made it an easier job for him now, and we can't, discount that. But also, like you said, there have been more games where they're down by 1 or 2, and it's going to be all right. We're going to put Chiago in for a couple innings instead of putting in McGill when you're down by 1 or 2, or Piamps when you're down by 1 or 2, or just something like that. So it's been better. It's been fine now. Like I think if he continues to do it this way for the rest of the year, we really won't have any problems. So I'm okay with where it's at right now. Last question that we'll take today is from HC Purdy. He says William Contreras is so good with like 8 O's, so that means really, really good. Is there any chance that the Brewers sign him long term? I know Cairo is coming, so maybe not. I think they should try to extend William Contreras. Honestly, I wouldn't, and I'm saying this without any insider info in this instance. I wouldn't be shocked if they already did try to approach him about an extension this last offseason. It maybe didn't get off the ground or get to the point they were hoping, but I think there definitely has to be interest in doing it. I think that, you're always going to run the risk when you sign a guy like that, but there really aren't a lot of guys like William Contreras, and he's still very young. Even if it's not something that really carves out a whole lot of free agent years, if it's at the very least something that just buys out the rest of ARB to at least give you, maybe gives him more on the front end in arbitration than he would have made in arbitration. Also just gives you a better financial roadmap as a club of knowing where you're at and just everyone's mind is kind of at ease because all parties know that X amount of dollars are locked into
Yep.
player earnings or the budget, depending on your perspective. But I don't think Cairo really needs to be a motivating factor in either direction here because I've said this before. You can have both of those guys on the roster at the same time playing a lot, and you're going to be fine. Like you look at what the Braves have done with Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud. You just look at, the outlook of catching. Like it is an extremely demanding position to
Yeah.
play. And that's what we're not. I mean, people have talked about it, so I'm not going to say it's not getting enough attention because it is. But it's rightfully getting that attention. Just the durability that we've seen from William Contreras behind the plate so far, like it's not normal, especially in today's day and age. And it's a very rare skill set. And just seeing how he's really come into his own as a hitter as well. I think when he was acquired, everyone kind of thought he was going to be more of a low average, high strikeout power guy. But now he's just kind of turned into a hitter who can just do everything depending on what the situation is. Like, we'll see him go yard in that Pirates game, but then the night before, we'll see him get down 0-2, start to work the count by fouling off some tough pitches and taking some pitches off the plate. And then he gets a slider, over the outer third and he just shortens up and punches it through a hole in the right side. Like,
Yeah.
not only to have a catcher who is that durable and does the things that he does, but also just to have a hitter with that kind of skill set. Like that in and of itself, even if you forget entirely about the catching part, that's also really rare because he basically operates with like, I'm not going to say three different swings, but he's got at least like three very distinct varieties of the swing, and they've all been fine tuned pretty well to the point that he can just kind of pick and choose whichever one he wants to use based on the game situation, and that's a really rare skill set as well. Like most guys, it's hard to just fight one kind of swing and just get your A swing locked in, let alone have some different variations that are all feeling good at the same time. And he's not always going to keep hitting the way he is right now. Like this is probably the peak.
Yeah.
Like, and it's he's going to hit a rough patch at some point where things come back down to earth. But I think just the makeup of the production he's at so far, well, it doesn't mean he's always going to be at this level. It means that he's going to sustainably be able to hit and to be able to
Yeah.
do that as a catcher and to be able to do that under the workload he's taken on right now. It's extremely rare. You're looking at one of the best players in baseball here, and anytime you have one of the best players in baseball, you need to be thinking pretty hard about extending him.
Yeah. I'm mostly in the same boat. I think what you touched on in terms of probably not buying out too much of the free agency, that would be my preference, honestly. He will be about 30, maybe even 31 when he hits free. I think 30 when he hits free agency. You can buy him out through like age 32. That would be perfect. But catchers do start in general. That's usually about when it starts getting to a point where they might need to look at playing first base or DHing a lot more. And for a guy like Contreras, that might be fine because, like you talked about, right now, he's not just a good hitting catcher. He's one of the better hitters in baseball, period. It's not just for the catcher position. Um, so, in that regard, like you can extend the bat and live with the fact that maybe he doesn't even catch at that point later on in his career or however long you extend him. But I think the point of you can buy out the arbitration years and lock yourself into no arbitration hearings, no issues on any of those fronts. And everybody knows exactly where you're at. And like you said, it can help them plan for the future with, all right, we know we got Churio and Contreras locked in through these years, whatever it is, at this money. We don't have to try and plan for like $4 or $5 million differences or any of that stuff. Like it's helpful to just have your balance set in those certain positions, and then you can build everything around that. So I definitely would reach those conversations. If I'm the Brewers, I would have those conversations. And like you said, it wouldn't shock me if they tried to this offseason. And if I were in Contreras' spot, I don't know that I would have been super interested this past offseason when it was probably a little early and they were probably trying to get him at a pretty big team discount. But I would still continue to have those conversations because this is a guy who's legitimately one of the best players in baseball at the moment. And you want those guys to stay around on your team for sure.
Final point on that front too, with Cairo, like you talked about, even if you extend William, maybe you do it with the thought in mind that
Yeah.
the catching workload goes down every year or roughly like progressively.
Right.
And then you get a more DH at bats or wherever else you work him into the lineup, and then you can kind of make that transition to Cairo's catching more. especially if it does play out that Cairo ends up as more of a defensive first catcher. I think that, and this is all up in the air a little bit now that he's had the
Yeah.
the major shoulder injury. But offensively, like the profile was there to be a good hitting catcher, but at the very least, like floor was really good defensive
Yep.
catcher, and that's enough to help carry him. But again, like there's a very, very easy path for both of these
Yeah.
guys to coexist on the rosters. So with
100%.
that, we will jump into Spencer's minor league sandbox. So take it away for the next couple minutes here.
Whoop,
And I
whoop.
said I said couple intentionally.
I heard it. I know. All right, I'll go fast. We'll start with pitching performances as usual. Tyler Waisner, who I had talked about a few episodes ago, he was moved up or promoted to AAA. Really, really rough first two starts. A guy who barely walks anybody suddenly walked the park in both of those outings. But start number 3 went very well. He went 6 innings. He gave up 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts, only 2 hits, one of which was a solo homer. But he kind of showed off a full 6-pitch repertoire because he does throw 6 pitches. He's got his sinker, which he used the most. Honestly, I don't know that I agree with that being his primary fastball, but he doesn't exactly have a great fastball of any kind. He also throws a cutter and a four seam. The four seam is probably worse than the sinker, but it's got a little bit more velo. The slider is his best pitch, in my opinion, although it hasn't gotten a ton of whiff at AAA so far. The curveball's been his best breaking ball. He was able to generate a 50% whiff rate in that last start on not a huge sample, but it's a pretty good pitch. I think the curve's been his best one so far at AAA based on kind of the metrics we're seeing. And it is interesting because there's 2 very different shapes between the slider and the curveball, but they're both basically in that 83 to 84 range. So it might be down the line, it wouldn't shock me if the Brewers are trying to separate those velocities a little bit because it might be hurting one or the other on any given night. And then he also throws a changeup, which has actually been pretty good and looks pretty decent. That's more in the mid 80s as well. So the issue I think he's running into more than anything is that his fastball's in the 92, 93 range. And then his cutter, slider, curveball, changeup are all kind of 82 to 85. And that's pretty similar in terms of velocity bands. So hitters aren't having to worry about 3 different, in my opinion, one of the best things a pitcher can have is at least 3 different velocity bands for his pitches where you've got a hitter that has to worry about 3 different timings basically. And right now I would say that's my only concern with Waisner is that there's not really that difference between them. But I like him. It was good to see a really good start. 9 strikeouts was his career high in any minor league level. So really good to see him bounce back after 2 starts that didn't go well. Alexander Corniel, he was signed out of the Dominican Republic in 2019. He'll be 23 later in the year. His last 2 starts have been 13 shutout innings, or at least earned runs, I should say. He gave up 1 unearned. 13 strikeouts. He does have 6 walks, but only 4 hits. His fastball's in the low 90s. I've seen him up to 94. I don't know if he's gotten a little higher than that at times, but I've seen him up to 94. His slider is kind of in that low to mid 80s. It's got kind of a slurve type of movement. And then his changeup is mid 80s with a lot of run, but at times it shows depth. At times it's mostly just the run. So I'm curious if he's able to get a little bit more consistent with the amount of depth he gets on the pitch. But I think he has a pretty nice arm action, and I do think this is somebody who could add a little velocity, even though he's already 22. His delivery does take him off to the first base side pretty strongly. He falls off that way a lot and really hard. I'm curious if they might be able to get him to get back in line a little bit more, and that might help the velocity as well. But interesting arm at the very least. And then Carlos F. Rodriguez, another guy who struggled in AAA to begin the season. His last 2 starts, he's really figured things out. He's gone 6 innings and 5 innings, only allowing 1 earned run in both. He struck out 9 in one of the starts and 6 in the other. His stuff has kind of ticked up a little bit from where it was at the beginning of the year. His velo's up about a mile per hour on average on the fastball lately. He's also a 6-pitch guy, 4-seam cutter, sinker, slider, curveball, and changeup. Changeup, slider, and curve to me are the better offerings out of all of them. I do like the cutter. I think that's the fastball he could use. I could see like a righty Wade Miley type of approach for him, honestly, down the road. That's kind of how I view him, and kind of in that Colin Ray type of mold as well. Just 6 average-ish pitches, but they're all commanded pretty decently when he's on, and also all capable of getting some swing and miss at times as well. So it was really good to see him get back on track, and he is one of the youngest pitchers in AAA, so that always has to be kept in mind as well. Speaking of younger pitchers, Daniel Corniel is 19. He is in Carolina already, full season ball, signed out of Venezuela in 2022. He actually started today, so the numbers I'm about to read I don't think are completely up to date, but coming into today, he had 5 starts, a 2.28 ERA. He was striking out hitters at a 25% rate and an 8% walk rate, so pretty solid for a 19-year-old. He's got a really good breaking ball from what I've seen. Low A camera angles aren't always great. It's kind of hard to tell if he's throwing a slider or a curve, and I don't know what velocity it is at, but it has been getting a lot of swing and miss when I've watched. His four-seam fastball seems to have pretty decent ride at the top, and then at times it also runs. So I don't know if he's throwing 2 different pitches, but all his fastballs pretty much sit 90 to 92 and have touched a little bit higher based on what the announcers are telling you because they don't really show any velocity for that level. And then he shows a pretty solid changeup, especially to lefties. He'll use that as well. So the stats aren't anything insane, especially the strikeout or walk rate, but 19-year-old in full season ball with pretty decent stuff. So he's definitely one I will be keeping an eye on. And then Logan Henderson, who I think we got a question on as well from HC Purdy. He just asked, with all of the injuries piling up, are you starting to get worried we'll never see the potential of Logan Henderson? Along those lines, he did make his first rehab appearance in the Arizona Complex League this last week. He threw 2 perfect innings with 5 strikeouts. He's going to dominate that level. A guy who has a changeup on his level is just going. Nobody at that level is going to be able to hit him. But he is on his way to Appleton pretty soon. I think he might make one more appearance, it sounds like, in the Complex League. But this is another JUCO guy. He was a community college guy, technically out of Texas. 4th round pick in 2021, a guy who had a really good season in low A last year. And there were some reports this offseason of him going from, he sat like 91, 92 with his fastball last year. There were reports that he was up to 95, 96 in the offseason. I doubt that he'll be sitting there as a starter, but if he's more sitting in that 91, 94, that would help him a lot. And it also was reported that his induced vertical break had been up to 18 to 20 inches, whereas last year it was more in the 15 to 17. And that's a really big jump. That's where it starts to become more of an outlier. And given he has an elite changeup, the fastball being just a more positive, like all around pitch than what he's had before, this could be a guy who makes a pretty big jump. I know he's gotten some Drew Thorpe comparisons. I believe Prospect Tilt kind of compared him to him. He's been working on the slider. We haven't really gotten a chance to see it, but the reports in the offseason were also that were getting better. That was getting better. So I don't know. This is a guy I've had pretty high up on my rankings for a while internally for myself. And I'm excited to see him at high A. I'm hoping to go see him in person at some point in Appleton when he does get there. So love to get eyes on him in person. And then we'll take it to the offensive side. Wes Clark, talked about him last time, just returned from the IL. Small sample, but he is still hitting the ball well. Strikeout rate is up to about 27%, but he did get promoted to AAA this week, and he did just hit his first AAA homer today, 425 feet off the batter's eye in center. Huge power. Just a matter of if he can contain the swing and miss enough to be a positive hitter, because I don't know that the defense is going to be there much, but you can dream on a Rhys Hoskins type of player with Wes Clark. Like, that's kind of the ideal player that you could get out of him. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum with these next 2 guys, Carlos Rodriguez, not the pitcher, but the outfielder. He was signed in 2017 out of Venezuela. He was a popular breakout pick a couple of years ago, but he has struggled to stay healthy. He finally had a full season last year in AA, and he did pretty well, but he's carried it into even a better second year at Biloxi. He's got an 813 OPS, 148 WRC plus. His walk rate's over 10%. His strikeout rate is 12%. His whiff rate of 10.4 is the lowest in all of AA for hitters with at least 100 plate appearances, and it's the 4th lowest in all of full season ball. He is not a big power guy, but he has shown some extra base hit ability. He's very fast. He's got great bat to ball skills, obviously, and he's graded out really well defensively. So a guy I'm kind of hoping we get to see in AAA at some point, just to see if he can really step it up, because he does need to be. I think he's a minor league free agent this offseason, so the Brewers kind of have to make a decision on him soon. In a similar type of profile here, Juan Baez, he was a $10,000 signing in the 2022 international class. Seems to be a pretty big steal so far. Already in low A with a 119 WRC plus. He's already got 9 extra base hits. he's shown some pop, and he did crush a ball in spring training when he was up with the Brewers for a homer. But he hasn't gone deep for Carolina yet. Instead, he's just showing those ridiculous bat the ball skills. He has a 6.1 strikeout rate right now and a whiff rate of 15.2, which is third lowest amongst all low A hitters with 100 plate appearances. And the defense was a pretty big question mark for him last year. He had a lot of errors, almost 20 in only Arizona Complex League, and then a month of low A ball. So not that many opportunities. Thus far, he's only got 3. The majority of his errors last year were throwing, which to me is a better. If you're going to have to choose one or the other, I'd rather it be throwing. I think that's more likely to get fixed. And so far this year, 1 has been throwing and 2 have been fielding. He has good range. He has a pretty decent arm. I think he could handle second or third, but long term, I'd probably look at him as more of a second baseman. Eric Batanti was a pretty big bonus pick last year in the 3rd round of the draft. He had a terrible first week, but his second week has gone really, really well so far. He's hit 2 homers, a double, a triple, 1377 OPS. The guy has humongous power. He's only 18, and he will not be turning 19 until mid-November, so he'll play this whole season at 18. He has been playing third in the complex league, not any shortstop. He played there a tiny bit last year after getting drafted, but third feels like the long-term home. Really good athlete. Definitely has huge power. It's going to be a matter of if he can control the swing and miss, but this is a guy who's more of a project. Cooper Pratt is probably between the 2 high school picks that everyone talked about. Pratt's the guy who could probably move pretty quickly, and Batanti's the guy that you're looking at probably a 4-year project at the very least. But the ceiling for Batanti is as high as almost anybody in the system if he can really put it together at the plate because the raw power is unbelievable. And then lastly, we have Filippo Dituri. He was signed in 2023. He got a $1.3 million bonus, which when the Brewers give out a 7-figure bonus, you should probably take notice. They don't do it a ton for international guys. Churio's one of them. Gregory Barrios got one as well, who's a pretty big prospect at the moment, who's having a good year. But Dituri has a huge, huge arm. He plays short. He handles it well. Very good eye, really good bat to ball skills. He already has 4 extra base hits in his 38 plate appearances this year. Last year, he had 11 in his 222, so he is showing a little bit more pop. He's not super fast. He's closer to average than fast, I would say, but he is a decent base runner, and I think he'll probably steal some bases. And I will note that Fangraphs before the season had one of Eric Longenhagen's industry sources took Dituri as a pick to click as one of the potential biggest breakouts in all of baseball. And it's only been 38 plate appearances, like I said, but he's off to a great start. So that's interesting to me. Whenever somebody goes out on a limb for somebody like that, there were only like 20 players total that were mentioned in that list, and Dituri was one of them. So that's one I'll definitely be watching, keeping an eye on the complex box scores, and I'll be curious if he ever makes it to Carolina this year. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. And just, again, all stats that I read in terms of like percentile or ranking, those are all from True Media, which we get access to for Brewer Fanatic. So shout out to them. And minor league injury wise, Brock Wilkin did return from his facial fracture. I know a lot of people have been asking about that and wondering where he was. He's hit 2 homers since then, including a grand slam. He's wearing the full mask helmet, not like a C-flap, but a full mask. So it's like a softball helmet, basically, which I had not seen anyone do. But honestly, I respect him for it because a lot of people probably would feel uncomfortable doing it or feel like people are going to poke fun at it. And he clearly doesn't care. He just wanted to get back on the field. So good to see him back. I imagine there's still going to be a bit of an adjustment here as he gets used to playing with that and with the facial fracture. But seeing 2 homers and seeing the power that he has is really good. And then on the major league side, Rhys Hoskins, we talked about, out for 2 to 4 weeks, most likely. He's hoping to avoid a rehab assignment and to be able to just come back and play right away. DL Hall did throw a 35-pitch live bullpen on Tuesday. So that was basically 2 innings is what they were trying to simulate.
Live BP, live batting practice.
Yeah, live BP is probably, I would call it like live ABs.
It was like a sim session. They said live BP is what it was going to be, but I was out there when he was doing it. It was basically a sim game.
Okay.
Like he did an up down, like, yeah, it was,
Yeah.
that's essentially what it was.
Right. I know people jumped on the wording there with the live BP, like, oh, he was doing that when he was pitching.
I didn't
Which
think through that
honestly
one.
was kind of funny from some people, but
I didn't think through that one. That one's on me.
but I know you had tweeted this that Wade Miley had watched and said that Hall had been up to 95 on the fastball.
That was also on me because I worded it to make some people believe that Wade Miley was throwing 95. So I really
Yeah,
dropped the ball on two straight tweets there.
that one I actually was a little surprised people were confused on. I was like, come on, let's use a little logic here. I think we know who he's talking about, but whatever.
I can
Um,
be better. It's like Murph always says, you got to think about how you can get better. So
that's true. That's true. And speaking of Merck talking, he said afterwards that there was,
Murph is prone to talk. Yes.
yes, he is. He said afterwards that they are hopeful to get a rehab assignment going next. And the Timber Rattlers did announce right before we recorded here that DL Hall will be starting on a Sunday at the end of this week. So for the Timber Rattlers. So I guess if you're a local person, that would be a fun one to go watch, I would say. And I think it sounds like Jack might be there. So
I will try to get there for that one just so I can report on how that start goes for him. I'm curious to see how the stuff looks, see where the velo's at. They were collecting some data on him when he was throwing that sim session, so I didn't really look at the velo, but again, Wade said it was up to 95, so
yeah,
it's a good sign for him.
that is for sure. And then kind of with all the moves going on, JB Bukowskis was moved to the 60-day, which we had said may happen at some point soon. And then in terms of some people maybe coming back from injury, we got Taylor Clark. He had a 2 outing rehab stint in Nashville and then was reinstated off the IL and immediately optioned to Nashville. It is interesting. They were pretty much running up on the amount of service time where you can choose to not be optioned. So I think they put him on this rehab stint knowing that he was only going to do it for like 3 or 4 days, and then they would have to immediately reinstate him and option him just to avoid that. I guess it kind of sucks for him, but I also think the Brewers were probably going to be putting him in AAA to start the year either way. So I don't think he's like getting screwed out of anything here. I think this is just the Brewers operating on a smart timeline, really, just to make sure that they don't get in a spot where they have to have him in MLB right now. And
I
then
do kind of
also,
wonder if,
yeah,
sorry to butt in, I
no,
do
you're
kind
good.
of wonder if this is a situation where all parties know that he's going to be up at some point making
Yeah.
an impact. Like it's better for him to be in Nashville right now, but there's a path for him to be eating some innings here.
Oh, yeah.
Like I don't know how much longer Vieira is going to be able to hang on to his roster spot. That's a guy where, if you DFA him, open up a 40 spot. Clark's already on the 40 man, but you can open one up for somebody else kind of in a series of moves, and then you can get Clark into one of those spots in the bullpen. They are trying to stretch him out a little bit too. They were doing that in spring training.
Yep.
But if he kind of comes up and can take on that role of, hey, go out and eat, 2 to 3 innings for us, maybe even in some slightly higher leverage situations than you'd be willing to trust Vieira in. But we're gonna see Taylor Clark at some point.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it kind of sucks that this is the way it had to work out. But there's a part of me that speculatively wonders if it's like everyone's kind of at an understanding of like
I would imagine.
it's basically an extended rehab assignment now
Yep.
in name, not like in name, but in terms of what the goals are for him and trying to get him a little stretched out again. Like he'll be up here at some point.
Yeah. No, like you talked about opening up a 40-man spot. I'm kind of thinking Enoli Paredes might end up getting a chance here soon. He's been very good in AAA and
I,
actually
I
has
liked
2 pitches that play really well.
I liked what I saw from him in spring training. He's
Yeah.
he's got a live arm.
Yeah. So I think that I could see Clark and Paredes kind of replacing Vieira and White pretty soon. That would not shock me under any circumstances. But one other guy returning a little bit from his injury, his short injury, is Joey Weimer. He already began a rehab stint as well. He played for the Sounds today. I actually did not check how he did. Not sure on that, but he did already get into a Nashville lineup on his rehab assignment. So might see him back soon. My guess is he will also be on the rehab and then immediately optioned bus in terms of how they're going to handle this, but you never know. He very well could get a chance to stay up and play. It looks like he was 1 for 3 today. So, yeah, he got pulled later in the game. So we've already talked about Weimer and there's been a lot of discussion about Weimer, so we won't go into it, but I think there's still a lot to like about Joey Weimer. So I am hoping that the more opportunities he gets in AAA, the more he can kind of figure things out and potentially help the team down the road this season. But Jack, you want to wrap this thing up with a quick little preview of this 9-game road trip the Brewers have starting up soon?
So you stole my thunder for the opening sentence. But yes, the Brewers do have a 9-game road trip that they are embarking on. They will play 3 against Houston this coming weekend, 3 in Miami against the Marlins, and then 3 against the Boston Red Sox. So we're going to quickly look at that series against the Astros coming up because we do have the probables for that one. Freddie Peralta going to get the ball on Friday opposite Hunter Brown. That game starts at 7:10 p.m. Central Time. Saturday is going to be Bryce Wilson versus Justin Verlander, a star-studded pitching matchup. That one starts at 6:10. And then Sunday, the series finale is going to be a hopefully Colin Ray special. I need him to go 5 this time instead of 6. That's really ruining the fun of the Colin Ray special. This is all I cheer for every time he takes the mound. Just can he go exactly 5 innings? But we'll get him pitching against Spencer Arrighetti in that game. That's a 110 first pitch. So try to tune in for those games. Going to be an interesting stretch of games here for the Brewers. This will be the longest they've been on the road. When we come back next week, they will still be on the road. They'll be about to start that series against the Red Sox. So we'll be able to recap those Astros and Marlins series for you next week. Until then, thank you all for listening. As a reminder, you can follow each of us on our Twitter pages. You can find me at by Jack Stern. You can find Spencer at smichaelis234, and you can follow the pod at bf_pod, all on Twitter. And you can stream the pod on any of the major streaming platforms, or you can find it posted every week at Brewer Fanatic. Thank you all for listening. We will talk to you again at the same time next week.